My name is Garry Golden. I'm a professional futurist based in Brooklyn, New York. So while I was a graduate student at the University of Houston Future Studies program, I was contracted by the local Art Institute to come in and work with their staff to help them understand the dynamics of the millennial generation, which at the time was a very popular topic. And that work with the Art Institutes was the door that opened up my world to the landscape of arts education. So my own personal experience with the arts was around music. I was handed a clarinet by my parents in 4th grade and really enjoyed it and excelled and did well. And you know, I was not competitive, but I did quite well in the weekly tryouts and was first chair basically through the end of 6th grade through senior year of high school. One of the positive experiences that I had in that 4th, 5th grade period of learning how to play music was a fantastic teacher who encouraged pairing up. He was able to identify pairs within that clarinet section of individuals that could help each other and work well together. So that technique of having a peer support network was critical in those early years of learning music. So in the past few years, I've become re-engaged with the visual arts and have a collection of contemporary and street art in our own home. So when I think about the future of arts experiences for my young son Noah, I hope that it's a very balanced life experience. I would hope that his experience in the arts will stretch from music to visual arts to dance and movement and writing as well. So I think the case for what arts experiences brings to kind of the 21st century skill sets and mindsets has been made quite well in kind of the arts educator community. So Ken Robbins, there are a number of different individuals that have clearly communicated the role of creativity and collaboration that people gain from arts experiences. What I think needs to happen is that conversation needs to break out into the home and into the office, and that we need to see arts experiences inside the home and arts experiences inside the workplace that demonstrate to leaders the value of that creativity and that collaboration that come along with the process of creating and sharing art. Most people continue to see arts as something that is institutionally bound. I experience art by going to a place, and I think that notion of bringing arts integration into home and into the workplace environment will help to break down those boundaries. An interesting trend that we see in the world of kind of urban life and suburban life is this rise of third place. So third place is not work, it's not home, it's kind of that cafe environment where you go to just hang out and watch people and meet with friends and family. How do the arts play into transforming the third place into a creative environment will be a critical question. So in many communities across the country, you will find young people gathering in these third places after school and on weekends. You can go to local cafes and you'll see a loud group of young kids laughing and screaming in the corner, having a great time. I think that the experiences they have there tend to be very informal. So an opportunity for arts educators might be to pilot some partnerships with these third places and try to bring a structured approach to delivering programs around the arts inside these third places. I think that young people today live in a world that feels more competitive, quite possibly is more competitive. There's a microscope on everything that we do. And I think that pressure has some benefit in terms of building kind of a character of someone that can withstand stresses of the world. But arts experiences in the school that are able to relieve that pressure and to provide a fun experience and a really enriching experience will continue to be the best case from a student's perspective for arts in schools. So it's important to recognize that schools will always play a very important and central role in arts education. It's that the future of learning is going to be much more self-directed, much more lifelong oriented rather than life stage and institutionally oriented. Arts experiences in the school will remain very critical to young people, but we need to recognize that the tools for creating art, for experiencing art and analyzing those experiences are becoming more popular and available. So those experiences outside the classroom will be important for us to integrate into our lifelong learning. One of the potential gaps that I see in the world of arts education and arts experiences is that young people are being exposed to a whole set, an ecosystem of tools to create and share art. And teachers and instructors, in many cases artists themselves, are not always as well versed in these tools. So we have young people that are yearning to create using a set of tools that their teachers don't know how to use. So that is one potential gap and an opportunity for educators to learn more about these new ecosystems for creativity. Teachers are going to need to become learners themselves, and I think it's important to recognize that teachers will need to unlearn things and change habits that may have been more relevant to the past classroom environment. What I think they need to start doing today is follow the conversation. So how we become effective guides for 21st century learning is a very dynamic, unfolding conversation. And what we've seen over the past few years is the emergence of national and international platforms for these conversations on places like Twitter and 21st century education Ning social network sites. So there are probably a dozen or so places for you to participate in this conversation about what it means to be a teacher in the 21st century. It's all about finding the right environment that works for you. And if we want to look for individuals themselves, there are a number of kind of emerging leaders within the world of education. Salman Khan, leader of the Khan Academy, which has a vision of flipping the classroom and allowing students to learn at their own pace by using video and web-based tools of instruction at home, and then going into the classroom and doing the traditional homework together once everyone is on the same page. Salman Khan is a leader within this new thinking about the future of education and teaching. Follow him and then understand who are the people that are following Salman Khan, and that will be the door that opens you up to a list of leading edge thinkers. So I think it'll be important for teachers that want to become learners in these new tools for creativity to expand their own peer and social networks, that they need to meet with professionals in their local communities. They need to be able to find people online that can offer them a different perspective of a career in the creative arts. So how teachers network with other people that are not teachers is going to be very important for their own professional development. Follow smart people. That's always my mantra to people. Find individuals that challenge you. Find people that are informed and passionate about a particular topic that you don't know a lot about, and then start following those people. That's the best way to learn. And experiment. Teachers can pull together a small group of their colleagues and pick a set of 5 tools that young people may have brought to their attention, and take a month and have that small group of teachers create their own projects, right? Create their own portfolio and keep it close to heart. Don't feel obligated like they need to show what they've done, but in that small group setting, they can experiment with these tools and learn more about them. I always recommend, regardless of the profession, to consider your professional development by attending another industry conference. So if you are a teacher, go to a gaming conference. If you're a teacher, go to a graphic designer conference. Go to an event that will not have another teacher within 10 miles. Find a place where you can learn more about a different way of thinking, and that will help your own personal professional development. The typical response to, kind of a call to arms to learn more is, I don't have time, I don't have the budget, I don't have the resources, which can be true in many cases, and we all have busy lives. But we need to recognize the risk of not changing. Changing is very difficult. It requires us to unlearn assumptions about how we think the world works or should work. But we need to find ways to create the time and to find that inner curiosity and that passion that we expect our students to have about learning and ourselves. For teachers to become learners is the most important thing that we can ask of them moving forward. The key dynamic for the future of work is one that integrates creativity around innovation and collaboration. And those skills that you can derive from your arts experiences will be very important for teenagers to capture and continue and carry forward as they move into college and work. In the world of kind of arts and the creative class, we see the emergence of new types of jobs. Again, 15 years ago, if a young teenager would have said to his mom, "I want to become a gaming designer," the mother would have probably called up her friend and cried. And now that young person is making six figures and living in Southern California and having a great life. That's an example. That was a leading indicator. One of the jobs that we see emerging today is the user experience designer. This notion that service innovation and experience design for products and services across all industries, whether it's health or music or transportation, is going to be led by individuals that have this artistic foundation. So the experience designer of the future will likely come from communities that have a very strong arts foundation. There is a lot of conversation these days about the value of combining left-right thinking, and I think that it's very important just from a kind of a personal health standpoint that we have a very balanced approach to how we see and act in the world using our different brains. And I think it's valuable from a workplace standpoint. One example that we see in the world today is the comparison between company cultures, and one that gets a lot of attention is the engineering culture of Google, and the potential limitations that exist within that engineering culture of creating very compelling user experiences and really bringing creativity and artistic flair to the process. So when we think about the future of young people and the left-right brain combination, I think we need to recognize that some individuals will always have a natural tendency to go one way or the other. But for arts educators, it will be important to find ways to engage individuals that might have a dominant preference with experiences that balance that out. So in the world of technology, there is the programmer kind of archetype, the geek, the web developer. And out of this culture has come many wonderful things. It was the programmer culture that led to social networks. It was the geeks that were the first people to become social online. It was also out of this community that created this notion of open source. So this idea of creating tools and platforms for other individuals to use and create new tools and platforms. So that's a fantastic approach. The question we want to ask is, what can arts educators borrow from that community? What can an arts educator learn from a programmer? How might arts educators create a set of open source tools that other arts educators can use in the classroom? How might young people use platforms that are open to the public to create new forms of art? So this notion that arts educators can learn from programmers and programmers can learn from arts educators is a very important conversation to have. Teenagers that are interested in the arts and also interested in a career path in the creative sector, so anything related from gaming to media to communication, advertising, experience design. They certainly want to start building a portfolio of their arts experiences that allows them to communicate to schools that they wish to attend, employers that they wish to work for, and other peers that they might partner with. So the building and the management of a publicly facing portfolio of their arts experiences is going to be critical. And what that requires is that young people learn how to appropriately manage their identity online and know that E stands for evidence, and that their portfolio will be a reflection of their artistic ability and also their character. Young people have a natural, I think, openness to the world, and that their default is there will be no harm done by being transparent, and teaching them how to appropriately manage their identities and to have a higher sense of what you should not say publicly ever is a skill set and a mindset for the future. There are two types of portfolios. There's a portfolio that you keep that you would use in a more formal interview application setting, and then there is the portfolio that is public facing. Amongst young people, we see this desire to be discovered, and it's important that public facing portfolios have some sort of organized and connective tissue that brings people back to the broader work that they've done in the past. One of the issues that continues to get more attention is this intersection of social networks and online learning and privacy. So we need to continue having conversations about the appropriate level of transparency and accountability in our online lives. So for young people moving forward, they need to recognize that more of their life will be captured online. There will always be a risk that aspects of their lives will become public, even though they wish them to be private. But I think our expectations need to be balanced. The tools for managing privacy, the tools for managing our social networks in a way that doesn't expose everything to everyone are coming. And I think our best approach at looking at the future of privacy is one that's balanced. There is always risk for young people and teachers in having some sort of moment where a privacy event happens, but we need to expect that tools for managing more precise social sharing are coming into the world. So I had a wonderful experience a few months ago. I was visiting extended family relatives, and the son brought me up into his room and said, look at this, and he had hacked up a recording studio. So he had built his own microphone. He took pantyhose and wires and created a sound screen for the microphone, and he had this hardware that he created out of very cheap materials. And then he turned and he showed me the computer, and he started going through these websites, and he said, this is where I get my free soundtracks. This is the tool that I use that's free for mixing the audio. And then he played me a tape, and he sounded like Kanye West. And I realized that he had done this entire project without any direction from his parents or from teachers at school. And I asked him where he learned about it, and he said his friends. His friends had told him about the website with the sounds. His friends had told him about the tool for mixing the audio. So it's a combination of self-directed, passion-driven learning and peers, face-to-face peers. After he showed me this fully produced soundtrack and really kind of blew my mind, I said, have you ever looked at website development? And I was trying to build a bridge. So we need to recognize that a young person that's very interested in hip hop or some sort of sound recording, and they want to be a music producer or a celebrity star, that could just simply be the platform for exposing them to other creative industry jobs. So the question we want to ask ourselves today is, with young people having access to tools that can create perfect songs that sound like $1 million production studio delivered it, or they can Photoshop perfect images of the world. Is that still art? And how does that change how we teach them about the process, how we teach them about quality, about judgment? I think it is just how the world is. It is not good or bad. It's just the world that they're growing up in. So one way to look at kind of the opportunity and constraints of these tools that can deliver kind of a perfect output is that they are very process intensive. So the steps needed to go from recording your voice to a fully produced soundtrack are many. There are many steps in that process. And in most cases, they learn about those processes on their own. If they have a question, they go onto YouTube and they type in the question. They go to a user discussion group and they figure out how to solve the problem. So the more we can integrate process into arts education, the better we'll be. That's what employers want. That's what it means to be a truly self-directed learner. So arts educators might want to look at how they might change their approach to teaching to be much more process intensive. And that could include digital tools. Digital tools give great output, but they're very process and stage intensive. It'll be important for arts educators to communicate the value of critical thinking and creative thinking that arts experiences provide young people that will be relevant to them remaining relevant in the 21st century workforce. So it's very difficult to bring about the change you want to see in the world in your community. So the natural momentum of the world is to embrace business as usual. So in order for arts educators to have a future that's different from today, they need to be able to communicate a vision that's compelling enough to move people forward in a different direction. It cannot simply be the same arts vision that's existed in the past. So what I think the arts community needs to do is find ways to clearly communicate a vision of the value of arts experiences that sounds and looks very different from the past. We are in the very early stages of self-directed learning, and one of the things that people expect to play a central role in this future is the emergence of what we call learning management systems, or LMS. And what learning management systems do is serve as that personal, centralized archive of all of our work. We can imagine a future in which young people will learn to manage their portfolio of lifelong learning through this learning management system. So if they are in class and have a particular assignment, that will be kept and tested through the learning management system. If they then read an article or watch a video on television related to that same subject, that learning can also be integrated into the learning management system. So it's a very fluid and dynamic world, but we do expect that learning will be web-based and that all of our consumption of media will have some sort of connection to this central learning management system. And that's a very difficult concept for people to get their head around, much like the idea of a social network would have confused people 10 years ago. To say in 2000 to a young person, over the next 10 years, you're going to learn how to manage your identity and manage your relationships and share with people on these social networks would have led to a glazed look in their eye. And that same transition is occurring around learning management systems. We have not been taught how to manage our own learning. And learning management systems are expected to become the platform for young people and older people as well. So one of the outputs of self-directed and online learning is that we have a tremendous amount of data being produced. Data about process, data about our different learning styles, and outputs and outcomes. And when we think about the future of data, we need to imagine that there is a value chain associated with it. The lowest form of data, the lowest value form of data is descriptive. It's data about what has happened. And this is, ironically, the most widely used form of data in the world of education and learning is descriptive, what happened in the past. Looking to the future, The most valuable forms of data are predictive and prescriptive. Prescriptive data is the one that arts educators need to start thinking about. So what is prescriptive data? It's the data that tells you, based on what you've said you like, this is what you should probably do next. It's like Netflix or Amazon. If you liked that movie, if you liked that book, try this. It's what we call the recommendation economy. So for teachers to only operate in a world where they use descriptive data to describe what happened is quite limited and not as relevant to the future. So teachers that are able to use prescriptive data systems where they know what students like and are then able to offer them the next part of the experience that is specific to that person's passion points, that's where innovation is going to happen in arts education. So if you loved that performance, if you loved that one particular moment in the play, that one piece in the musical performance, go over to this performance and focus on that. It's the same thing. Think about an arts experience. We have teachers that will deliver an arts experience, and then they'll have a moment where they can gauge the feeling, the impact on the students in the classroom. But what about when the student leaves the classroom and goes home and talks to their parents about it? What about when they're talking with their friends about it on the way home? None of that emotional data, that sentiment, is analyzed. None of that sentiment is captured. So when we move into a future that is more transparent, and again needs to have its boundaries for privacy, but as we move towards this more transparent future, what type of sentiment analysis tools will arts educators use? What type of sentiment analysis tools can we use to improve the quality of the experience for students over the next decade? If I'm an arts educator looking at the future and what I might need to do in terms of curriculum, it is building in not just a traditional survey, but building in more capture opportunities to understand sentiment. So how do you design curriculum around this capture of sentiment? That is a critical question, specific to a set of tools, but also in terms of a strategy around curriculum design. Web-based tools are very cheap to build, they're very easy to use, and they're very realistic. So you can imagine that the spreading of tablets will mean that teachers are going to need to not just photocopy a fixed paper curriculum page into the tablet, they're going to need to rethink the entire page itself. So the role of software in creating very dynamic curriculum experiences on these tablets will require arts educators to learn more about those technologies. It's not a simple transfer of physical into digital. You can design curriculum experiences in a different way. So the future of a self-directed learning world will have a fantastic role for teachers in schools. But I think it's one that will be different. And many people have spoken about this transition as one from being the sage on the stage, the vessel of knowledge, to more of a facilitator and a guide. So teachers today that have gone through their own academic training have been instructed on the art of being that vessel of knowledge, certainly with skills around classroom management, and they naturally, I think, bring a guide mentality. But the dynamics of being a guide and a facilitator in the digital age are very different from the past. And it's going to require teachers to learn how to navigate a world of students that's more transparent, accountable, and automated. So it's likely that software will help in much of the mundane elements of teaching. So the grading and all of the things that teachers spend their time on today will likely be handled through some sort of software system. Two jobs for the future of teachers in this digital landscape, in this world of self-directed learning. One is to know the tools. Teachers are going to need to become more educated themselves on the whole landscape of tools. They don't need to pick winners, they don't need to become masters of the tools, but they need to understand the options that the young people can find on their own. So if young people can go out and find that tool, the teacher needs to know what that tool can do. And then the other thing that teachers need to be able to do is build that bridge from that one particular arts experiences to another arts experience, or that arts experience to a real world creative professional experience. So if someone is interested in mixing music, the teacher needs to be able to say the same set of tools exist for creating visual communication. And how about you look at a future in which you could be a graphic designer or a user experience designer using these types of tools? That will be the role of the teacher. So there are many things that are changing in the future landscape of technology. And I think a category for arts educators to pay attention to and to learn more about is one of natural user interfaces. Natural user interfaces. Today we live in a world, it's called the GUI world, G-U-I. It's graphical user interface. And it's a world in which we click on a mouse, touch a screen, we're looking at graphical representations. And the future of a natural user interface is one of speech, one of movement, gesture. So one of the most disruptive technology platforms out there today is the Microsoft Kinect. Microsoft Kinect. And this is Microsoft's way of getting back in the game. And what Microsoft Kinect does is that it uses infrared technology to understand how you are moving in the physical world. And it can capture that movement and then be used against some other experience. One of the fascinating aspects of Kinect is that Microsoft has decided to open source the API. So Microsoft has provided the inner code of how Kinect works that will enable software developers to build other applications on top of that platform. So we can expect that today, moving forward, we will see more gesture, movement-based technology experiences that will find themselves probably into the home first and then the classroom. So right now there are artists in the world that are hacking the Kinect. We have dancers, we have people that are teaching people how to paint using Kinect. Musicians have a fantastic opportunity using this Kinect platform because it is so movement and gesture focused. It should not be seen or promoted as a replacement to the music teacher. It is simply a tool to extend the learning and help the student become a better musician. But you can imagine a world where Bo is being watched by the Kinect device, and if that arm and that elbow are not in the right position, the Kinect will signal to the student, you've got to bring it up or down. And again, whether or not these tools are embraced by teachers in the classroom, they're certainly likely to find themselves into the home within the next few years. And another natural user interface is the world of wearables. They call them wearables. It's essentially taking textile, cloth material, and integrating sensors and electronics to create some sort of digital experience. So we see today, dancers and artists that are at that intersection of wearable digital technology, creating new types of experiences for dance and theater that allows individuals to see new forms of movement and data visualization based off of these wearable technologies. So imagine, the Kinect or wearable experience. An 8th grader goes and sees a theater performance and falls in love with a character and really identifies with a character. And you could imagine a near future within the next decade where they would go home or they would go to a cafe, a third place, an arts environment, and be able to recreate that scene. And instead of having the actor perform, they perform it themselves. So by using these Kinect and wearable systems, projection systems, they are able to basically recreate that environment and perform the scene themselves. So then the second piece of the natural user interface is the role of voice and conversation. In the world of consumer applications, we see the Apple Siri, which is a personal assistant, an agent that you ask questions to and it responds in complete sentences. But the real platform to watch as the gold standard is the IBM Watson. IBM Watson. This is a software program that defeated two human competitors in the world of Jeopardy. And this software program is essentially, it's a knowledge in a box. And Watson is able to engage the user in a conversation. It understands the nuances of human language. It understands skepticism or irony. It understands sarcasm. So we now see Watson being brought into the workplace. Watson is coming to work. We see Watson going into the healthcare industry to help doctors give better assessments based off of information that might not exist inside the doctor's own head. Watson helps that process. But the moment we need to watch for is when Watson comes to the classroom. When a Watson-type natural language interface is brought into the classroom with the student. So a few years ago, teachers were really kind of taken back that students were using the internet to do their homework, that they were Googling the questions and the answers. But in the future, we can imagine a world in which a Watson-like personal assistant is part of the everyday life of young people in our world. So then from an arts education standpoint, you have to ask yourself, what's the opportunity? How can arts educators use this type of conversation agent to engage people in learning more about the arts? So let's say a young person goes to a symphony performance on a Friday night outside of school. Well, then after that performance, they can ask that Watson system questions about the instruments, about the composer, about the building that the performance was held in. And then 2 years later, that same performance is being done by a different symphony in a different city, and that young person finds themselves in that place. Watson will then be able to cue up that memory and connect those two experiences. So we can look at Watson in many ways, much like this learning management system. It provides the continuity of learning across these different arts experiences. Watson is truly in the workplace. It is being piloted across a few healthcare industries. But for the arts world, we need to ask ourselves, what is our Watson? What is our Watson? So will educators in general create their own platforms? Just like 20 years ago, we couldn't have imagined that we would need to create a website for our classroom, and now we use websites to communicate with our teachers, or we use websites to communicate with parents, etc. Can you imagine 5-10 years from now that arts educators will need to create some sort of Watson-type application? Quite possible, quite possible.